October 14th, 2025. Police discovered a girl beneath an old house at the edge of the forest. She had been kept in the basement for 15 years. But the most terrifying part wasn't how she survived. The most terrifying part was the first thing she said. The moment the door opened. It was raining heavily that night. Detective Ray Morgan stepped out of his car and stared at the old house. It was in ruins, the surroundings completely silent, as if no one had lived there for years. Neighbors said the owner had vanished many years ago. But 3 days earlier, an anonymous caller had contacted the police. From beneath the house, I can hear a little girl crying. At first, no one believed it. Everyone assumed it was a cat or the wind. But a thermal camera detected movement underground. One person. No, two people. The detective slowly entered the house. The air was thick with the smell of mold. Dust particles floated through the darkness. Then, a knocking sound. From below, officers searched the kitchen. Nothing. Then one of them noticed deep scratch marks on the floor, as if something heavy had been dragged across it for years. Beneath an old table, there was an iron door, a basement door. The lock was fastened from the outside. The detective slowly unlocked it. At that moment, a very faint voice came from inside. "Please, don't let him hear you." Everyone froze. The detective slowly opened the door. The smell that came from inside was unbearable. Rotting food, blood, dampness, the smell of death. The staircase descended into pure darkness. One officer immediately turned away and vomited. The detective aimed his flashlight downward, and he saw her. The girl appeared to be around 16 years old. Her skin was pale, her hair long and matted. Barefoot, dried blood marked her feet. She shielded her face from the light, as if it terrified her. 15 years without sunlight. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part were the walls. Every wall of the basement was covered in drawings. Children's drawings, lines everywhere, tally marks, thousands of them, and in the corner, a small wooden chair facing the wall, as if someone had forced her to sit there for years. The detective approached her slowly. "Don't be afraid. You're safe now." The girl slowly lifted her head. Her lips trembled, and she quietly said, "He told me you were coming." Police searched the entire basement. No one else. No hidden passage, no trace. Only the girl's footprints. This was impossible, because the basement door had been locked from the outside for over 10 years. Then one officer quietly said, "If she was alone down here, then who was feeding her?" Silence fell over the basement, and then, from inside the wall, 3 slow knocks were heard. Everyone in the basement froze. Knock! 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 The sound was coming from inside the wall. One officer stepped back in fear. Detective Morgan pressed his flashlight against the wall. There was a very thin crack in the old concrete, and from inside that crack, something moved, like someone's eye, for just 1 second. Then it was gone. The girl suddenly panicked. She backed away into the corner and said in a trembling voice, "He's awake." The detective ordered everyone to take the girl upstairs, but as she approached the staircase, She burst into tears. "No, please, don't take me outside." The detective was confused. Why? The girl slowly raised her head. Her eyes were strange, like someone who had adapted to total darkness, and she said, "He doesn't like outside." At that moment, the house lights flickered and went out. The entire house was swallowed by darkness. Only the flashlight remained, and from above, footsteps were heard, slow, heavy, on the creaking floor. But there was no one in the house except the police. One officer found an old video camera inside a cabinet. The cassette was still inside. They turned the camera on. A blurry image appeared on the screen. The date, 2010. The video showed this same basement. The camera was shaking. Someone was carrying a little girl down the stairs. The girl was crying. The man behind the camera spoke slowly. "This place is your home now." Then the video cut out abruptly. The officers stood in silence. The girl stared at the screen, motionless. Then she quietly said, "That is not my father." Everyone looked at her. The detective slowly asked, "Then, who locked you in here?" The girl's eyes drifted toward the dark corridor, and she whispered, "The man in the basement." Suddenly, a strange sound came from below, as if someone were crawling inside the wall, a scraping sound from within the concrete. One officer drew his weapon. Then, part of the wall was struck from the inside. Hard, dust fell. Again, and then. The concrete cracked. From inside, a hand emerged. Long, dark fingernails. The girl screamed in absolute terror. "I told you! He would wake up!" The hand slowly widened the crack. The wall crumbled further. Chunks of concrete and dust fell to the ground. The flashlight flickered. Officers backed away. Detective Morgan raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking. From the darkness, something was emerging, its full form not yet visible. Only a voice, low, muffled, inhuman. "She is my daughter." The girl covered her ears and screamed, "No, he's lying!" At that moment, the detective noticed something. On the hand that had come through the wall, there was a police badge. The figure fully emerged from the wall, but it was not a monster. It was a man, extremely thin, eyes adapted to darkness, hands wounded, but on his body, an old police uniform. Detective Morgan stepped closer and suddenly recognized the face. This was Detective Harris, the man who had gone missing 15 years ago. Harris slowly looked at the girl and whispered, "I kept you safe from the one outside." The girl began to cry. "No, you locked me in." Harris shook his head. His eyes held boundless exhaustion. "I kept you here until they came for you. I knew they would come on this exact day." Detective Morgan moved closer to Harris. "Harris, who is this girl?" Harris was silent for a long moment, then slowly said, "She is the sister of that child. The child who was murdered 15 years ago." Everyone shuddered. Harris continued, "The killer was still out there. He wanted to kill this girl too. Until I found him, this place was the safest place for her." The girl slowly moved toward Harris and took his hand. "He's still out there. You never found him, did you?" Everyone looked at each other. Detective Morgan quietly asked, Who was the killer?" The girl slowly raised her head, and her eyes locked onto Detective Morgan. "You don't know?" He came here tonight with you." Everyone turned around. The officers stared at each other with suspicion. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then, one of the officers in the back slowly began to step away. Detective Morgan turned to him. "Bryson, where are you going?" Bryson stopped. His hands were trembling, and he slowly said, "I just needed some air." The girl suddenly screamed, "Him! He's the one!" Bryson stood frozen for 1 second. Then he ran upstairs. Officers chased after him, but there was no light in the house. Darkness had consumed everything. The flashlight flickered and went out. Complete darkness. Then a single sound came from above, a crash. Then silence. Officers turned on their lights and rushed upstairs. Bryson was lying by the door, unconscious, in his hand an old photograph, 2 children in it, and behind them a small wooden house in the forest. Detective Morgan stared at the photo for a long time, then slowly turned to the girl. "Is this your house?" The girl looked at the photo and in a very quiet voice said, "No, that was his house. He was born in that house, and he went back to that house." Everyone froze because they understood Bryson was not unconscious. He was asleep, and on his face was a smile. The investigation is still ongoing. The house in the forest was never found. Bryson remembers nothing, and the girl still repeats one thing every night, every hour. He will come back. He always comes back. The investigation is still ongoing. Where is the house in the forest? Who is Bryson really? Is the girl safe now? Part 2 drops next week.